Our scripture reading for today is taken from the Gospel of Mark, a gospel we have visited often in this past year. That Gospel of Mark always has the quality of being dramatically to the point. Just gets right at it, powerfully and simply. An inspiration for your minister. One of the scribes came near and heard them disputing with one another. And seeing that he answered them well, he asked him, "Which commandment is first of all?" Jesus answered, "The first is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength.' The second is this, 'You shall love your neighbor as yourself.' There is no other commandment greater than these." Then the scribe said to him, "You are right, teacher. You have truly said that he is one, and besides him there is no other. And to love him with all the heart and with all the understanding and with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself. This is much more important than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." And after that, no one dared to ask him any more questions. Today, my lesson is entitled, Awakening to Community. Awakening to Community. In our Unity churches, we often emphasize the awakening of the individual to his or her ultimate potential as God's creation, as a child of God. So does this idea extend to our church community or congregation as a whole? How can we each awaken to the potential and truth of what we are as a spiritual family? Is our church more than just the sum of its individual members? Many believe in the power of community, and this can only be focused through the choice we make to become a member of Unity, to join ourselves with the Unity idea. And so today we're going to touch on what membership can mean for the individual and for our community, our church as a whole. Now, many of you received the recent surveys that were mailed out, and we thank you for your response, those of you that completed them in great detail. Actually, 70 surveys were sent out, and 30 were returned. And although some were disappointed in that, wondering where the other 40 surveys are, actually that's a very good statistical rate of return to receive about 40 to 45%. So we thank you for your contribution. As a result, we have responded, and you will have already noticed a few changes in our order of service and in how things are done. And some individuals have already begun responding to me, and I encourage you to do that, and to give your feedback. Some were simply Some were simply questioning, well, why would we do anything different? Not realizing that some in the congregation felt like it was time to do some things differently. So I encourage you to offer your feedback to any of your trustees on the board, or to me if you choose. regarding any changes in the order of service, how it's working for you or not working, and we take that into consideration. But I also ask you to be willing to experience things a little differently, with changes here and there. It's good. It's good to, as the Pope said on his recent visit to the United States, to break down walls and to shake things up. So there's going to be a little bit of shaking. And so I know that you will receive that in a creative way, and you're certainly welcome to give your feedback, as I said, to myself or to any of the trustees. There was a wide variety of self-reported participation in various activities, but the Sunday service, of course, received the greatest participation, and that's only natural in our Unity centers that the worship service on Sunday would receive the greatest attendance. But we did get some information back, always helpful suggestions, new ideas, and also comments of things that weren't working for individuals. But one of the things that was noted was there was some lack among members and friends, some lack of familiarity with the various committees and their function within the church. Some just commenting that they couldn't really respond about a given a given committee within the church because they really didn't know what it was all about. So I encourage you to learn more about the committees in the church and how you might serve and help them in their work, because they really accomplish a lot of the activity or the preparation for what we experience on Sunday and our other times during the week. Now, this question of membership, I think, was beautifully suggested by Jesus' words. The most important commandment, or the very first principle, or the whole thing in a nutshell, if you will, was to love one's God, one's very source, and then also to love one's neighbor as oneself. Now, for many years, my growing up in the church, first the Baptist church, and then later I came to Unity, I saw that phrase, to love one's neighbor as oneself, in a very simplistic interpretation, that I was to love my neighbor just as I loved myself, in equal measure, you might say. But as I studied Unity longer through the years and delved into my own experience, the meaning of those words began to change. And I began to realize that to truly love my neighbor as myself was to realize that there was one spirit in my neighbor that was also the one spirit within myself. That in truth we were connected. We were all expressions of life. Even though I didn't always understand, and certainly in our very active community life as Americans, we're going into an intense time over the next year of political discussions and debates. And there's a lot of focus on differences, different ways of believing, different ways of how things should be done. So I think it's most important as unity students, as students of truth, however you want to express your spiritual journey, to make a concerted effort in this coming year that as you hear the talk about all that divides us, all that makes us different in how we live, how we choose to vote, the candidates that we support, that you make a real concerted effort to remember the one Spirit that is within all of us. That you make a special effort to meditate upon the fact that there is one Spirit of life working in all human beings, and there is a great struggle for an understanding of the meaning of life, for the purpose of one's life, for the purpose of our nation, our world, what should be done. And rather than putting people in categories of those people, and those people, and those people, to realize what it is to love your neighbor as yourself. And even though you don't understand the choices that they make, to honor the Spirit of God, to honor that divine spark that is within them. It doesn't mean that you have to take on their opinions or that you need to make the same choices that they do. But it does mean that you hold them in a certain degree of value, of worth. That you're not adding to the problem by condemning others for the choices that they make. You can hold them gently when you don't understand. And of course, there are times as well when we have to stand and make certain choices and say, that particular behavior is not acceptable in our community. We do have to stand for what we feel is right. Now, you may wonder, what in the world does this have to do with membership here in Unity? Well, as I said, our teaching in Unity is often an individual path of self-development. You notice that the tradition is to speak of the Unity student, the individual who is on their path of self-discovery. But what about our community life? How do we work together? Are we simply an assemblage of little isolated individuals? Or are we creating a community of great power and potential? One of the questions that appeared in various and numerous ways in the survey that we did was this concern or trying to understand why our church has not grown into vast numbers, why there aren't more people. And that's a very interesting question, because that does reflect the power of our community life to attract others into this Unity Center. And I don't have the answers. If any of you have the answers, I will be glad to hear it. But one thing I do know is that every ministry that I've been in that seems to be attracting new people, they're coming because they love the feeling and the sense of support. I know many of you have had the experience when someone discovers a Unity Center, they say, "Oh, I feel like I've come home." In other words, they feel like they are in a center or a place or a community where they are appreciated, that, the very highest, greatest potential within them is supported by the whole, by the community. It's a place that they leave, typically on a Sunday afternoon, and they feel uplifted. Or what my late mother used to call, "I feel like I've really been to church today." It's given her something for the whole week. And so that gives us a little bit of an indication of what we can do to create that sense of community. That when we come into our center here on Sunday, each one of us can think to oneself. We don't have to talk about it in an outer way, but think, what is mine to do today? How can I support the others who have come to Unity at the Lake on this given Sunday or another time during the week? How can I support them? I can support them in my mutual regard for what is active within them at any stage in their life. You know, as long as we're here, there's something to work on. As long as we're here, there is something for us to work on. So each one of us can contribute to the overall atmosphere that translates to visitors and guests as an atmosphere of warmth, of acceptance, of empowerment. You know, one of the greatest things people are seeking, even in this modern day and age, a time of technology and all kinds of gadgets, people are still seeking for hope. Hope. That whatever challenge they might be going through in their life, in their career, in their family, with their neighbors, that they can be hopeful that things will work out. And we live in a time when they say, frankly, many of our young people are suffering in many outer ways because truly they have lost a sense of hope about the world and their place in it. Does it make any difference? Things aren't going to get any better. Wars are going to continue. People will continue to suffer. A number of years ago, I overheard my mother telling a story. She was talking to a retired doctor in our ministry in Syracuse, New York, and he was about 87. Mother was into her 90s at the time. And they really were the only two people of that age bracket in the church. And they often talked because they could relate to one another. Everybody else was decades younger. And one day, Mother said to Dr. Nathan, as we called him, she said, "It finally dawned on me." She said, "I've been so worried. Here I am in this wheelchair. What can I do for this church? She said, I can't do what the others are doing, setting up the sanctuary. I can't do what the others are doing, working in the bookstore. We had something called Adventures in the World, where each month we would go out and kayak or bike or do these outer adventures in the world. She said, I can't do that. And she was really struggling with what she could do at her stage in life. And finally she said, Nathan, I've realized what is mine to do in this church. She said, looking at the bookstore as an example, she said, I will sell hope. Well, at first, as was often the case with Wilda, we didn't know exactly what she was thinking. But it never failed that if we talked with her, we always learned something. And a lot of the younger women enjoyed talking to her and finding out what it was like to be a woman in your 90s. And she said, but I want to tell people things that inspire hope. And I said, well, Mother, you're a great example because people can look at you and see that you are not overly concerned about being in that wheelchair. You are not overly concerned about your chronological age. But you are showing people that even at advanced age, one can still be hopeful about life and its possibilities. One can still be hopeful. There's still something to learn. There's still something to experience. There's still something to enjoy. And so, being the adventurous soul that she was, she told me at 95, she loved to travel. She said, I want one more good trip in this life. And I said, would you like to go to Italy? And she said, sure. And I said, well, we'll have to take someone else along to help. Someone that can help me, because I can't manage her wheelchair and the luggage and everything. But if we take a third person, who was my best friend and very strong, I said, we can manage this, we can do it. And so she was thrilled. And we had all kinds of adventures, including attending the Festival of Mary in Rome, at the Basilica of Mary, only to arrive to a huge crowd and a sign that said Pontifical Mass, that the Pope would be doing the Mass. As we approached, her eyes were bright. We got up to the door finally. Security came over and said, Senora, Senora. They took us through all the security, led us around, and placed her within about 20 feet of the altar. So that out of 4,000 people, she was in a stone's throw, I guess we would say, of not only the Pope, but the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church as well. And she saw them both perform the Mass. She was delighted. And after many adventures in the Alps and in Venice, getting her around all the bridges and canals of Venice, it was quite an interesting challenge, but we did it. And then finally, it was time to go home. And if the trip had not been interesting enough, they put me on the plane and left my mother and my friend who was pushing her wheelchair, took them somewhere else. And I got on the plane and I thought, they've lost my mother. So I waited patiently. The plane was full. They had brought in loaded the luggage. They had brought in, those big carts of food that they bring in and put into the galley and all of this. And it's like, well, I just guess I have to trust this situation. And then I looked out the window. And there, with one of those forklifts that carries the food containers and puts them in that back door of the plane where the galley is, at least on this one, here comes this food service truck with its platform about 20 feet off the runway, and my mother sitting in her wheelchair riding along. And there she is, looking out at this adventure until they approach the plane, and then she's neatly inserted in her wheelchair into the galley door and then brought to her seat next to me. And she said, well, that was different. But even at that age, and I remember when we had a memorial service in Syracuse after her passing, that one of the women, nowhere near my mother's age, let's say I guess she was middle-aged, said what fascinated her the most and gave her hope was getting to know Wilda and finding out how much delight and adventure she found in life and wanted to grow as well. Because my mother had asked this individual, she said, when James and I first came to Syracuse, the first couple in the church to take us out to dinner, they were so nice and they took us to a beautiful, beautiful restaurant. And she said, but it was a professor from Syracuse University who was white and his wife who was black. And she said, Sibby, help me understand. I was raised just believing interracial marriage was not appropriate. And she said, but times have changed. Help me understand. I want to change my thinking. And this woman, Sibby, said she would never forget that because she wanted to be one day in her 90s still willing to change her thinking. Still being flexible enough, creative enough, responsive enough that she could change how she understood the world. That perhaps her previous ideas and opinions were not big enough. In the last election, we had debates back then too, remember? And one of the candidates, I won't even mention his name, that's not important, but he received a question from someone in the audience who said, well, what do you think about this or that social issue, because God doesn't want us to do this, and God doesn't want this, and And the candidate said, you're so sure that you know what God wants? And he said, yes. And the candidate responded, young man, you need to get a bigger God. You need to get a bigger God. Now I encourage you to join. We've been having a marvelous romp through the quest on Sunday mornings. Leslie Porth has been doing a wonderful job, and the quest is a great opportunity to refresh your understanding or develop an understanding of Unity's basic teachings. And then in December, on Sunday mornings, we will have a couple of informational classes about membership. Now, I have heard this story in I don't know how many ministries, and that is, oh, I'm not a joiner. I knew people in the founding congregation in Kansas City, people who had attended the church for 20 or 30 years, but weren't members. Oh, I don't join. I'm asking you to open your mind to the possibility, realizing that becoming a member, if you aren't already, in this church has two beneficial qualities. One, membership is a benefit to you because you are aligning yourself, connecting yourself with the unity idea. But you are also doing something for the welfare of the community at large. How? Because by your joining, by your becoming an official voting member of the church, you're saying, what we're doing here at Unity is important. It is worthy. It is valuable for the people here and valuable for our community. And that's something I want to stand up for. I want to be connected with that. So I encourage you, if you haven't joined the church to this date, to consider membership in our Unity Church. We will have a new members Sunday, December 20th, right during Christmas week. That'll be a festive time. So I encourage you to consider that. Now let's take a time for prayer. And something new this morning, but something that we will be experiencing once a month in the coming months, is an opportunity to experience the prayer service or the affirmative statements that have been prepared for us by our world headquarters and the prayer ministry known as Silent Unity. Silent Unity is the department of Unity World Headquarters that produces Daily Word, which, of course, you notice we read each Sunday, that it's a center point. And it's not that you can't read that at home on your own, but it becomes a focal place, a focal point, for us to join the greater Unity family throughout the world. All those who are reading that daily word for that given day. You may not be aware that this prayer service is prepared every month for your use as well. All you have to do is go to the unity.org website, and there you can either read it or print it out for yourself. So I invite you to become comfortable in your seat, to close your eyes as we join in these affirmative statements from Silent Unity. The prayer work of Silent Unity never ceases. And it is not just members of Unity churches worldwide, but the vast majority of those who turn to Silent Unity for prayer support are not affiliated with any Unity church. But they know that they can call or contact Silent Unity, and someone will pray with them, one-to-one. That someone will hear their need and then support them through the power of prayer. So let us center ourselves in this statement. I am calm, centered, and serene. I take a deep, cleansing breath and truly appreciate the beauty of this moment. My thoughts become tranquil, and serene as I experience the peace of my being. Divine peace enfolds me as I rest in the silence. Spirit guides me to my highest good. Spirit guides me to my highest good. With gratitude, I celebrate the truth of my being. I am a radiant expression of life. Divine wisdom guides my choices and actions, enriching my life and blessing the lives of others. I rest in this inner light in the silence of prayer. Healing life renews my whole being. Healing life renews my whole being. I give thanks for the healing life of God active within me. I send thoughts of love and life to every cell of my body, knowing that perfect healing life is flowing through me. My body responds with renewed strength, energy, and vitality. With unwavering faith and a grateful heart, I rest in the stillness of silence. God is my all. I am grateful and abundantly blessed. God is my all. I am grateful and abundantly blessed. God is my source of unlimited good. Centered in this awareness, I give thanks for prospering ideas, and I open to the goodness of God in full measure. I welcome every blessing, expected and unexpected. I affirm, discern, and give thanks for the abundance and the supply in my life at this time as I rest in the silence. I live in harmony and envision a world at peace. I live in harmony and envision a world at peace. I center my thoughts now on divine love and wisdom. With a heart and mind united, I am guided in all I do. I am an ambassador of peace through my harmonious interactions with others. I hold an image of the possibility, the potential of all people living in peace and cooperation. For a moment in the silence, I hold this vision of God's peaceable kingdom, knowing all is well. And gently now we allow our attention to return to this outer sanctuary, the circle of friends with whom we are seated, but always remembering we do not pray alone. We remember the great chorus of the silence, of all seekers of the good and the true, and become a great unity in the power of prayer, a consciousness that knows there is one presence and one power, ultimately, in our lives, in our spiritual community, and in our world. And in this idea we live and hope and evolve to faith and conviction, standing in the presence and goodness of our God. And so it is. And we say, Amen.